Imagine waking up in a Westchester mansion and realizing your husband just signed your entire life to his mistress. But before he can celebrate, you step into his IPO party with one thing he never saw coming, a 20-year-old secret contract that flips every asset, every company, every lie. Back to you. Cameras are rolling, the FBI is in the room, and the mistress? She's not who he hired. She's who he should have feared. This isn't just a divorce, it's a demolition. Forged psych reports, drugged drinks, a son turned against his mother, millions funneled offshore, and one paper trap your father built decades ago that turns betrayal into confession. When the badge flashes and the cuffs click, the question isn't, is he guilty? It's, how deep does this network go? And what truth is too dangerous to tell? Stay to the end to see a phoenix rise. 17 ruined women rebuilt into owners, a family remade, and a final twist buried 30 feet beneath an empty lot. If Jaw Drop reveals justice served cold and comeback energy are your thing, tap, like, drop your boldest theory in the comments, share this with a friend who loves high-stakes drama, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. The notification appeared on Sarah Mitchell's phone at exactly 3:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, while she was arranging white roses in the kitchen of their Westchester estate. Her daughter Emma had tagged her in a TikTok video from what was supposed to be a friend's birthday party in Manhattan. But there, in the background of the shaky footage, was David. Her husband of 20 years, who was supposedly at a tech conference in Boston, stood laughing in a hotel bar with his arm around a stunning brunette half his age. Sarah set down the roses with steady hands, though her mind was already racing. She recognized the woman immediately. Jessica Blake, the ambitious startup founder David had been mentoring for the past 6 months. The one he insisted was brilliant but needed guidance. The one whose calls he always took behind closed doors. She replayed the video 3 times, studying every detail. The way Jessica leaned into him, the casual intimacy of his hand on her lower back, the particular smile she hadn't seen on David's face in years. The timestamp showed 2:14 p.m. when he'd texted her about boring keynote speeches at the conference. Sarah walked to David's home office, her footsteps silent on the imported marble floors. His password hadn't changed in 5 years. She never snooped before, respecting the boundaries of their marriage. But that contract had clearly been broken. The credit card statements told a story of their own. The Ritz-Carlton, not in Boston but right here in Manhattan. Cartier, Bergdorf Goodman, dinner at 11 Madison Park for 2 on a night he claimed to be entertaining Japanese investors. The front door opened at 6:30, David's usual time. Sarah was in the living room, the printed statements arranged on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. Good conference, she asked, not looking up from her wine glass. David loosened his tie, moving toward the bar. Productive. Made some excellent connections. The keynote on blockchain integration was particularly insightful. Was Jessica there? His hand paused for a fraction of a second on the whiskey decanter. Jessica? Why would she be at an enterprise tech conference? Sarah finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. I don't know, David. Why would she be at the St. Regis bar at 2:14 this afternoon when you were supposedly in Boston? The color drained from his face, then returned as anger. But instead of denying it, David did something unexpected. He laughed, not nervously, but with genuine amusement. Oh, Sarah, he said, pouring his drink with steady hands. You finally noticed. I was wondering how long it would take. She stood, confusion replacing her carefully controlled anger. You're not even going to deny it? David pulled out his phone, swiping through documents. Deny it? No. But before you get dramatic, you should know something. I've been preparing for this conversation for 2 years. He handed her his phone. On the screen was a medical report from a psychiatrist she'd never heard of, diagnosing her with bipolar disorder and paranoid delusions. Her signature was at the bottom, though she'd never seen this document before. That's not real, Sarah said, her voice shaking for the first time. I never signed that. Your sister thinks otherwise, David continued, pulling up another document. An affidavit from her own sister, Jennifer, stating she'd witnessed Sarah's erratic behavior and mental health struggles. So does your friend from the country club, Margaret. They're both very concerned about you. Sarah's legs felt weak. She sank back onto the couch. You've been planning this. Planning? David moved closer, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. Sarah, I've been documenting your instability for years. The paranoia about me having affairs, the accusations, the crying fits you don't remember. Any judge will see you're not well. In fact, I've been advised that given your condition, I should be seeking sole custody of Emma. The wine glass shattered in Sarah's grip. Blood mixed with Pinot Noir on the white carpet, but she didn't feel the cuts. This wasn't just an affair. This was a carefully orchestrated destruction of her entire life. Sarah's lawyer, William Crawford, had come highly recommended by her college roommate. His office overlooked Central Park, all leather and mahogany, the kind of place that whispered old money and older secrets. Sarah sat across from him 3 days after the confrontation, her hand bandaged, her confidence shaken but not broken. The psychiatric reports are fabricated, Crawford said, after reviewing the documents. We can prove that. The signatures are forged, though good forgeries. But Sarah, I need to ask you something difficult. Has David been drugging you? The question hit her like ice water. What? Some of these documented episodes, the dates correspond with times you were reportedly seen acting strangely at social events. The country club luncheon, where you allegedly broke down crying. The charity gala, where witnesses say you were slurring your words and had to be escorted out. Sarah's mind raced backward. Those events. She'd had unexplained gaps in memory, attributed them to exhaustion or perhaps too much wine. But David had always been the one bringing her drinks those nights. My God, she whispered. Crawford's expression was grim. We'll need hair follicle tests immediately. But Sarah, there's good news. I've been tracking David's assets, and he's been sloppy. There's a significant cryptocurrency portfolio he hasn't disclosed, nearly 15 million in Bitcoin. Yet for the first time in days, Sarah felt hope. That's marital property. He can't hide it. Exactly, we've got leverage. He wants to play dirty? We can play harder. But when Sarah returned home that afternoon, David was in the kitchen with Jessica, not hiding, not ashamed, but cooking dinner together like a married couple. Jessica wore Sarah's apron, the one Emma had made in middle school art class. Sarah, David said casually, not even turning around, we need to discuss living arrangements. Jessica will be moving in tomorrow. I think it would be best if you stayed in the pool house temporarily. This is my home, Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. Jessica turned then, her smile sharp as a blade. Actually, about that, David, should we tell her now? David wiped his hands on a dish towel, his movements deliberate. The cryptocurrency portfolio Crawford found. I leaked that information intentionally. Check the wallet now. Sarah pulled out her phone, accessing the blockchain explorer Crawford had shown her. The wallet that had contained 15 million yesterday now showed a balance of 0. The transfer had occurred 1 hour ago to an unknown address. Everything's been moved to a company in the Cayman Islands, David explained. A company that technically doesn't exist yet will own everything soon enough. Jessica's quite brilliant with international finance. Did I mention she has a master's from Wharton? Sarah's phone rang. Crawford, his voice was panicked. Sarah, the trust fund from your father, the 30 million. When did you last check on it? Her blood turned cold. The trust fund was protected, had been since her father's death 10 years ago. It required her signature for any changes. It's locked. It requires my signature and a witness. Your mother's funeral, Crawford said quietly. The papers David had you sign for the insurance. One of them wasn't insurance. Sarah hung up without another word. She looked at David, who was watching her with the satisfaction of a chess master who just announced checkmate in 3 moves. $30 million, Sarah. Did you really think I'd let you keep your daddy's money? You signed it all over to me while you were crying over your mother's casket. Even got the funeral director to witness it. Grief makes people so careless with paperwork. Jessica laughed, the sound like breaking glass. The best part? We've already spent most of it. This house is being transferred to my name tomorrow. For tax purposes, of course. Sarah stood perfectly still, her mind calculating. They thought they'd won. They thought she was broken, destroyed, finished. They didn't know about the recordings from the hidden cameras she'd installed last week. They didn't know about Marcus Stone, her former colleague from Wall Street who now worked for the SEC. Most importantly, they didn't know about the contract from 20 years ago, sitting in a safety deposit box that even David didn't know existed. But she wouldn't reveal any of that now. Instead, she turned and walked out, leaving them to their victory dinner. Let them think they'd won. The real game was just beginning. The gas station was 12 miles from home when Sarah's credit card stopped working. First the Platinum Amex, then the Visa, then even the emergency debit card linked to her personal account. The teenager behind the counter looked at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion as she tried card after card. "Ma'am, you got cash? Otherwise, I gotta call the cops. You can't just pump gas and not pay." Sarah's hands shook as she searched her purse. $17 in change. Not even enough for the full tank she'd already pumped. The kid sighed and took what she had, writing off the rest with a warning not to come back. The text from David came as she sat in her car, humiliated and furious. "Forgot to mention you're no longer an authorized user on any accounts. Might want to start budgeting. Jessica suggested food stamps might help." The next catastrophe came within hours. Sarah drove to their son Michael's college to break the news in person. He deserved to know what his father was doing. But when she arrived at Columbia, Michael was already waiting outside his dorm, a cardboard box in his arms. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" His face was red with anger and shame. "Dad just emptied my college fund. The bursar's office says I have 72 hours to pay this semester's tuition or I'm out. $40,000, Mom, gone." Sarah reached for him, but he stepped back. "Michael, listen to me. Your father is—" "Dad already called. He told me about your mental health issues, the paranoia, the delusions about him having affairs. He said you've been unstable for years and he's been protecting me from it." The betrayal in her son's eyes was worse than any financial loss. David had weaponized their own child against her. "Michael, please, just let me explain." But he was already walking away. "I'm going to stay with my roommate's family until this gets sorted out. Dad said Jessica's parents might be able to help with tuition. At least someone's thinking about my future." Sarah drove home in a daze, her gas gauge hovering near empty with no way to fill it. When she finally reached the house at 9 p.m., her keycard wouldn't work. The electronic lock had been changed. She could see lights on inside, hear music and laughter. David and Jessica were having a dinner party. Through the window, she recognized several neighbors, people she'd considered friends. She called David. He answered on the first ring, his voice loud enough that others could hear. "Sarah, why are you calling? You know the restraining order paperwork specifically says no contact." "There's no restraining order," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "There will be tomorrow," he replied cheerfully. "Jessica's lawyer is filing it first thing. We have security footage of you breaking a glass and threatening us. Very compelling evidence of your violent tendencies." The line went dead. Sarah sat in her car in her own driveway, locked out of her own home, watching her husband host a party with his mistress. She finally drove to her sister Jennifer's apartment in the city, only to find a note on the door. "Sarah, I can't enable your delusions anymore. David showed me the medical reports. Please get help." With nowhere else to go, Sarah spent the night in her car in a Walmart parking lot, using their bathroom and buying dinner from the McDonald's inside with her last $10. She'd gone from a $40 million estate to homeless in less than 12 hours. The morning brought worse news. Crawford called as she sat in her cold car, watching the sunrise. "Sarah, I'm being investigated by the Bar Association. Someone submitted evidence that I've been taking bribes. It's fabricated, but I have to recuse myself from your case immediately. I can't represent you anymore." After Crawford, she'd reached out to Marcus Stone. Her old colleague from her Wall Street days was now with the SEC, and he'd always harbored a subtle crush on her. He agreed to meet her at a diner in Jersey, far from prying eyes. Marcus looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. Sarah laid out everything: David's hidden assets, the fraudulent transfers to Jessica, the forged medical documents. Marcus took notes, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "This is insider trading, wire fraud, conspiracy," he said. "David's not just hiding assets in a divorce. He's committing federal crimes. I can help you, Sarah, but I need concrete evidence." Sarah pulled out a USB drive. Security footage from our home system. David doesn't know I had administrative access. It shows him discussing the asset transfers, drugging my drinks, even laughing about the forged signatures. Marcus pocketed the drive. Give me 48 hours. I'll have a federal investigation opened. He won't just lose the money. He'll go to prison. For the first time in days, Sarah felt safe, protected. She had an ally with real power. Marcus walked her to her car, his hand reassuring on her shoulder. Where are you staying? He asked. My car, actually, she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. Marcus pulled out his wallet, handed her $500 in cash. Get a hotel. Order room service. In 2 days, this will all be over. 24 hours later, Marcus Stone was arrested by federal agents in his office. The charges, accepting bribes from multiple Wall Street firms, insider trading, and evidence tampering. The evidence was overwhelming, documented in emails from his computer, financial records showing payments to offshore accounts. All of it fabricated, all of it planted by David's cybersecurity team. Sarah heard about it on the news from her cheap motel room. The anchor described Marcus as a corrupt federal agent who preyed on vulnerable women involved in divorce proceedings, promising help in exchange for sexual favors. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A video file. She opened it to find security footage from the diner where she'd met Marcus, doctored to make it look like she was sliding money across the table to him. The message below was from Jessica. Your boyfriend can't save you now. Stop fighting or the next one to be arrested will be you. Sarah sat in the motel room, her last $100 dwindling, when the truth about Jessica Blake hit her like a physical blow. It started with a reverse image search on Google, born from desperate curiosity about the woman who'd destroyed her life. Jessica's professional headshot from her supposed startup's website matched another photo from 3 years ago. Different name then? Jennifer Walsh, romantic partner of tech executive Brian Morrison. Morrison's name rang a bell. Sarah searched further. The man had committed suicide 2 years ago after losing everything in a bitter divorce where his assets had mysteriously vanished offshore. His wife had been left with nothing. The mistress had disappeared. Another search, another photo match. This time, Jessica was Christina Bell, 4 years ago, with pharmaceutical CEO Robert Marshall. Robert was now serving 5 years for embezzlement, claiming he had been set up. His wife had died in a suspicious car accident. Sarah's hands trembled as she compiled the evidence. Jessica wasn't just a mistress. She was a professional, an asset extractor who specialized in destroying wealthy men, though the men never seemed to realize they were the actual targets until it was too late. She had to warn David. Despite everything, she couldn't let him walk into this trap blindly. She drove to his office, knowing she was violating the restraining order Jessica had mentioned. But this was bigger than their marriage. David's secretary, Martha, who'd known Sarah for 15 years, wouldn't let her pass the lobby. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. I have strict instructions. Martha, please, just give him this. Sarah handed her the folder of evidence about Jessica. Tell him to look at it. His life depends on it. 3 hours later, David called her from a blocked number. His voice was different, amused, delighted even. Sarah, 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 he said, drawing out her name like he was savoring wine. You beautiful, naive fool. You think you've discovered something? You think Jessica's been playing me? Sarah's blood went cold. You know what she is? I know exactly what she is because I hired her, you stupid woman. 2 years ago, paid her $5 million up front with another 10 on completion. She's not conning me. She's working for me. Every single thing she's done has been at my direction. The phone slipped from Sarah's numb fingers, but she could still hear his voice from the speaker. Did you think I suddenly fell in love with a 28-year-old? Please. Jessica's a professional, the best in the business. She destroys wives in divorces, makes them look crazy, violent, unstable. She's done this for 7 different executives. I found her through Richardson at the club. You remember his wife, Patricia? The one who had that psychotic break and ended up institutionalized? That was Jessica's work. Sarah grabbed the phone, her voice barely a whisper. The other wives. What happened to them? 1 suicide, 2 institutionalizations, 4 living in poverty. Jessica's very thorough. And now she's going to do the same to you. The best part? Once you're declared mentally incompetent, I get full control of everything, including that nice little trust fund you thought was protected. You're a monster, Sarah breathed. I'm a businessman, David corrected, and you're a liability. 20 years, Sarah, 20 years of your moral superiority, your daddy's money hanging over my head, your constant reminder that you funded my start. Well, guess what? I've built an empire worth 300 million, and I'm not giving you half of it just because we shared a bed. The FBI will find nothing. Jessica's too good. Every crime has your fingerprints on it. The forged signatures, your handwriting perfectly duplicated. The hidden assets under your social security number. Even that meeting with Marcus Stone, we have video of you bribing him. Not doctored, Sarah. Real. You did hand him something at that diner. We just changed what the envelope contained in the digital trail. Sarah's mind reeled. Michael, you turned our son against me. Michael was easy. Kids always believe their fathers, especially when mom's acting erratic, which you will be, by the way. Jessica added a little something to the water supply in your motel room. Nothing fatal, just enough to make you seem unhinged when the police arrive. Sarah looked at the half-empty water bottle on the nightstand, her vision already starting to blur slightly. You poisoned me? Temporary hallucinogens. In about an hour, you'll be seeing things that aren't there, talking to people who don't exist. The motel manager will call the police. They'll take you for psychiatric evaluation. And with your documented history of mental illness, well, it's a pretty clear path to involuntary commitment. The room was starting to spin. Sarah gripped the desk for support. David, please, 20 years. We have a son together. Had a son. Michael's already signed papers to legally emancipate himself from you. Jessica's idea. Very clean, legally speaking. Before Sarah could respond, the line went dead. The walls began to ripple like water. The patterns in the cheap motel carpet started to move, forming faces that screamed silently. She stumbled to the bathroom and tried to make herself throw up, but it was too late. Whatever Jessica had put in the water was already in her bloodstream. She had minutes, maybe less, before she lost herself completely. With shaking hands, she grabbed her laptop, her vision fracturing into kaleidoscope patterns. She had to send one email, just one. Her fingers felt like they belonged to someone else as she typed the address from memory, an address she hadn't used in 20 years. She attached a single document, then hit send just as the door began to melt into liquid wood. The last thing Sarah remembered was the motel manager's terrified face as she apparently tried to climb out a window that didn't exist, screaming about spiders made of money crawling under her skin. The psychiatric hold lasted 72 hours. Sarah woke on the third day, the drugs finally clear from her system, to find a woman in a sharp gray suit sitting beside her hospital bed. The woman was in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Mitchell, the woman said, closing the file she'd been reading. My name is Catherine Shaw. I'm a senior partner at Shaw, Brennan, and Associates. We received your email. Sarah tried to sit up, her wrists still showing marks from the restraints. I don't remember sending any email. You sent it to an address that hasn't been active in 2 decades. An emergency contact protocol you established when you first created a certain document. A document that's been sitting in our vault, waiting. The fog in Sarah's mind cleared instantly. The contract? Catherine smiled, a shark smile that promised blood in the water. The founding documents of Mitchell Technologies, specifically the partnership agreement between you and David Mitchell, signed 6 months before your marriage. A fascinating piece of legal work. Your father's lawyer was quite thorough. Sarah's father, the man who'd built a fortune in real estate and taught her to never, ever enter a business relationship without protection. When she'd met David, a brilliant programmer with big dreams but no capital, her father had been dying of cancer. His last advice, love with your heart, darling, but protect yourself with paper. Does it still stand? Sarah asked, her voice hoarse from 3 days of sedation. Oh, it's ironclad. But Mrs. Mitchell, there's something else. The woman you've been investigating, Jessica Blake, she's not who your husband thinks she is either. Catherine pulled out a badge. FB. Jessica Blake is Agent Jessica Thornton. She's been undercover for 3 years, investigating a ring of professional con artists who specialize in high-net-worth divorces. Your husband thought he was hiring a criminal. He actually hired a federal agent. Sarah's mind struggled to process this. But Marcus Stone, the arrest? Staged. Agent Stone is fine, though he's playing his part in federal custody beautifully. We needed David to believe he'd won, to get comfortable, to complete the crime. He's transferred over $200 million in assets to Jessica. Federal wire fraud across state lines. 20 years minimum sentence. You've been watching this whole time? Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. While I was homeless, while my son turned against me, while I was drugged and hospitalized, Catherine's expression softened slightly. We needed the full conspiracy. Every player, every crime. Your husband isn't the only one involved. There's a network of lawyers, doctors, even judges who've been helping destroy wives in these schemes. 17 women over the past 5 years, Mrs. Mitchell. You're the only one who fought back effectively. Because of the contract? Show me, Catherine said, pulling out a copy. This clause here, Section 7, subsection B, in the event of attempted fraud, embezzlement, or criminal conspiracy by either party against the other, full ownership of the company and all its assets transfers immediately to the wrong party. But more importantly, subsection C. Sarah read the words she'd forgotten, written by her father's lawyer in dense legalese that translated simply, any attempt to hide assets or defraud the silent partner would trigger automatic confession to any and all previous financial crimes. What previous crimes? Sarah asked. Catherine pulled out another file, thick with photographs and documents. 22 years ago, David Mitchell didn't just work for a tech company. He sold corporate secrets to Chinese competitors. Industrial espionage. The FBI could never prove it. But you know who suspected? Your father. He hired private investigators. He knew exactly who David was when you brought him home. Sarah's world tilted. My father knew? Your father was dying. He couldn't stop you from marrying David, but he could protect you. This contract, it's not just a business agreement. It's a confession waiting to happen. The moment David committed fraud against you, he automatically admitted to his old crimes. Crimes that have no statute of limitations because he fled the country briefly in 2003, tolling the clock. But I don't understand. If you're FBI, if Jessica's FBI, why the elaborate setup? Catherine stood, walked to the window. Because David Mitchell is small fish, Mrs. Mitchell. The real target is the network. The judges who sign false psychiatric holds. The doctors who provide fake diagnoses. The lawyers who facilitate asset hiding. Jessica's been gathering evidence on all of them. And in 48 hours, when David signs the final transfer papers at his IPO celebration, we'll have them all. Sarah thought of her son, turned against her, her reputation destroyed, her life in ruins. And what about me? What's left for me after you get your arrests? Catherine turned back, her expression unreadable. That depends entirely on one question, Mrs. Mitchell. What did you know about David's espionage 22 years ago? The room went silent. Sarah could hear her heart monitor beeping, could feel the weight of the question. The truth was a locked box she'd buried so deep even she had almost forgotten it. Everything, Sarah finally whispered. I knew everything. Catherine Shaw pulled out a recording device, its red light blinking steadily. I need you to understand, Mrs. Mitchell, that what you say now will determine whether you're a witness or a co-conspirator in a 22-year-old federal case. Sarah closed her eyes, transported back to a cramped apartment in Boston, 23 years old, wildly in love with a brilliant programmer who worked late nights and came home with expensive gifts he shouldn't have been able to afford on his salary. I was an analyst at Goldman Sachs, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the monitors showing her elevated heart rate, specializing in tech sector evaluations. David was dating me specifically to get information. I figured that out after 3 months. Catherine leaned forward. And you continued the relationship? I did more than that. I started feeding him false information, carefully crafted data that looked real, but would lead to failed investments. I was trying to expose whoever was buying the intel. Sarah met Catherine's eyes. I was 23 and thought I was saving him from himself. But then your father got involved. My father ran his own investigation. He discovered David wasn't just stealing corporate secrets from my firm. He was selling defense contractor information to foreign governments, blueprints for military software that could compromise national security. Sarah's hands clenched the hospital blanket. My father gave me a choice: turn David in or become complicit. And you chose option 3, Catherine said, pulling out the contract. You married him with this hanging over his head. My father was dying. He had 6 months left. He said David was brilliant but corrupt, and that corruption would eventually turn on me. So yes, we created the contract, a perfect trap that would spring the moment David betrayed me personally. Sarah laughed bitterly. My father predicted 20 years almost exactly. Catherine's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, then hung up. There's been a development. David's moved up his timeline. The IPO celebration is happening now, not in 48 hours. He's about to sign everything over to Jessica at a party with 300 witnesses, including several federal judges he's corrupted. Sarah threw off her blankets. I need to be there. Mrs. Mitchell, you're on a psychiatric hold. You can't leave. Actually, Sarah said, standing despite the slight dizziness, check the paperwork. The hold was for 72 hours. It's been 73. I'm leaving AMA, but I'm leaving. Catherine made a quick decision. There's a car waiting downstairs. Agent Thornton doesn't know we've made contact with you. As far as she knows, you're still the enemy. Can you play that part? Sarah thought of David's smug voice, of Michael's betrayal, of the needle tracks in her arm from the involuntary sedation. I've been playing parts for 20 years. One more performance won't kill me. The drive to Manhattan took 40 minutes. Sarah used the time to review the documents Catherine provided. The full scope of David's empire, $300 million in assets, 12 subsidiary companies, and a team of 40 executives who'd helped build his technology firm into a powerhouse. All of it built on the foundation of her father's money and his criminal connections. There's something else, Catherine said as they neared the venue, a towering glass hotel in Midtown. Your son, Michael, he's not emancipated. That was a lie to break you. He's actually been in protective custody for the past week. David tried to have him kidnapped. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What? Insurance policy. If you fought back, he planned to use Michael as leverage. Agent Thornton intercepted the kidnapping attempt. Your son is safe, but he doesn't know the truth about any of this. He still believes his father's version. They pulled up to the hotel. Through the glass facade, Sarah could see the party in full swing. Tech industry titans, politicians, even a few celebrities David had cultivated. And at the center, David himself, looking younger than his 48 years in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, Jessica on his arm in a stunning red dress that had probably cost more than most people's cars. You go in first, Catherine instructed. Make a scene. Be the crazy ex-wife they expect. While security is dealing with you, we'll position our agents. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. Hospital gown replaced with a simple black dress Catherine had provided, but her face showed the strain of the past week. Hollow cheeks, dark circles, the look of a woman on the edge. Perfect for what she needed to do. She walked through the lobby, past the security that didn't recognize her at first. The invitation check was at the ballroom entrance. The young woman with the iPad looked up, recognized Sarah, and her eyes widened in alarm. Miss Mitchell? You're not on the list. In fact, there's a note here that says, that says what? Sarah raised her voice just enough to draw attention. That I'm not allowed at my own husband's celebration? The company I funded? Heads were turning. David noticed her from across the room, his face shifting from surprise to calculation to false concern. He walked over, Jessica trailing behind, both of them playing their parts. Sarah, he said loudly, performing for the growing audience. You shouldn't be here. You're not well. Remember? The doctors said, the doctors you paid, Sarah shot back, letting her voice crack with emotion. The false diagnoses, the forged signatures. Tell them, David. Tell everyone how you drugged me, stole my inheritance, turned my son against me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Security guards started moving closer. David's expression was pure sympathy, Oscar-worthy in its sincerity. Someone call her doctor. She's having another episode. Jessica stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. Mrs. Mitchell, let us help you. You're confused. The divorce has been hard on everyone, but these accusations, Sarah jerked away. Don't touch me. I know what you are. I know about Morrison, about Robert, about all of them. She looked at the crowd, some filming with their phones. She's a professional con artist. She destroys wives for money. That's when David played his master stroke. He pulled out his phone, showed the screen to the nearest guests. This is from her psychiatric evaluation 3 days ago. Paranoid delusions, violent tendencies. She broke a glass and threatened us. She's sick, and I've been trying to protect her from herself. 2 security guards grabbed Sarah's arms. She struggled, playing up the hysteria. The contract, she screamed as they started dragging her out. Ask him about the founding contract. Ask him about the espionage. David's face went white at the word espionage, but he recovered quickly. She's been saying these things for weeks. Part of her delusion is that I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. As Sarah was dragged toward the exit, she saw Catherine Shaw enter with a team of what looked like party guests, but were obviously federal agents. Their eyes too alert, their positions too strategic. The trap was set. But then something unexpected happened. Jessica Blake, Agent Jessica Thornton, grabbed a champagne flute and tapped it with a ring. The clear sound cut through the chaos, commanding attention. Actually, Jessica said, her voice different now, authoritative instead of sultry, Mrs. Mitchell is telling the truth. The ballroom fell silent except for the sound of David's champagne glass shattering on the marble floor. 300 guests stood frozen, watching as Jessica Blake reached into her clutch and pulled out an FBI badge. Agent Jessica Thornton, Federal Bureau of Investigation. David Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and industrial espionage. David stumbled backward, his face cycling through expressions like a broken slot machine. You're joking. This is part of the show, right? Some elaborate... 3 years, David, Jessica said, stepping toward him as FBI agents flooded in from every entrance. 3 years I've been tracking a network of professionals who destroy spouses in high-net-worth divorces. You thought you were hiring the best. You were. The best federal agent in financial crimes. Sarah watched from the doorway as David's world imploded. But he wasn't going down without a fight. His hand went to his pocket, pulling out his phone. Dead man's switch, he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned room. One button and every asset, every document, every piece of evidence disappears into encrypted servers in 12 different countries. You'll never recover a penny. Catherine Shaw stepped forward from the crowd. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Senior Prosecutor Catherine Shaw. Before you push that button, you should know that your wife sent us something 3 days ago, a document you signed 23 years ago. She held up the contract and David's hand trembled. That's not legally binding. It was a business agreement, not Section 7, subsection C, Catherine read aloud. Upon any attempt to defraud the silent partner, the executing party automatically confesses to any and all previous financial crimes. You've been confessing to treason for the past week, Mr. Mitchell. But David still held his phone like a weapon. You're lying. There's no proof of any espionage. That was over 20 years ago. Sarah stepped forward, the security guards releasing her at a nod from Catherine. Actually, David, there is proof. You see, while you were so busy destroying me this week, you forgot something important. I wasn't just your wife, I was your accomplice. The room gasped. Even Catherine looked surprised. This wasn't in the script. 23 years ago, Sarah continued, walking slowly toward her husband, I helped you steal those defense contracts. I was young, stupid, in love. I thought we were whistleblowers, exposing corruption. I didn't know you were selling to foreign governments until my father discovered it. David's face went from pale to green. You're admitting to federal crimes. You'll go to prison too. Yes, Sarah said simply. I will. But here's the difference, David. I kept records. Every email, every document, every communication you thought you deleted. They're all in a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan, box number 447. I gave the FBI the key 3 days ago. It was a lie. There was no box 447. But David didn't know that. His thumb moved toward the phone screen. toward the button that would destroy everything. Push it, Sarah said. Please. Because the moment you do, Baal, you're not just confessing to the espionage, you're activating Clause 9 of our contract, the suicide clause. Any attempt to destroy shared assets triggers immediate transfer of all holdings to the surviving partner, including your 40% of the company you think I don't know about. There is no 40%, David snarled. I own everything. Sarah smiled then, a genuine smile for the first time in years. Mitchell Technologies, yes, but not the parent company, the one registered in Delaware before we were married, the one that owns Mitchell Technologies and 11 other subsidiaries. I'm still 40% owner of that, aren't I? Silent partner, just like the contract says. David's lawyer, who'd been standing frozen in the corner, finally spoke. Don't say anything else, David. Not a word, but it was too late. David's ego, his need to be the smartest person in the room, overwhelmed his judgment. You stupid woman. You think you've won? I have congressional judges in my pocket. Senator Morrison owes me. This won't even make it to trial. FBI agents were already moving through the crowd, arresting the judges David had just named. Senator Morrison was being read his rights by the door. The entire network, exposed in seconds by David's arrogance. Jessica approached David with handcuffs. The burner phone in your left pocket has recordings of every conversation we've had for 6 months. The Cayman Islands account, we've been monitoring it since day one. The psychiatrist who diagnosed Sarah, he flipped yesterday, full immunity for his testimony. As the handcuffs clicked around David's wrists, he looked at Sarah one last time. Michael will never forgive you. You've destroyed his father. Sarah's composure finally cracked, but not in the way David expected. She laughed, actually laughed. Michael's been working with the FBI for the past week, David. Who do you think gave them access to your home office? Your son, our son, chose justice over you. That broke him. David Mitchell, the man who'd built an empire on brilliance and betrayal, collapsed to his knees as agents led him away. The crowd parted like water, phones recording every second of his downfall. But the evening wasn't over. Catherine Shaw raised her voice to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight is the culmination of a 3-year federal investigation. 17 women have been systematically destroyed by a network of corrupt professionals. Every person who participated, from the lawyers who hid assets to the doctors who provided false diagnoses, will be prosecuted. She turned to Sarah. Mrs. Mitchell, you've admitted to crimes. You understand we have to take you into custody as well? Sarah nodded, holding out her wrists, but Jessica stepped between them. Actually, ma'am, Mrs. Mitchell has been working as a confidential informant since she sent that email 3 days ago. She's covered under Immunity Agreement 237B. Catherine frowned. I didn't authorize any immunity agreement. No, Jessica said, pulling out a document, but Director Harrison did. 20 minutes ago. Seems he was impressed by Mrs. Mitchell's willingness to risk everything to expose this network. Also, the espionage charges from 23 years ago. The real seller was Marcus Robert, who's been in federal prison for 18 years. Mrs. Mitchell was cleared in the original investigation. Her father made sure of that before he died. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. All these years, she'd carried the guilt of crimes she hadn't actually committed. Her father had protected her even then. There's more, Jessica continued. The psychiatric hold, the drugging, the false imprisonment. Mrs. Mitchell has grounds for one of the largest civil suits in New York history. Conservative estimate? $200 million in damages. I don't want money, Sarah said quietly. I want my son to know the truth. I want my reputation restored. And I want every woman David and his network destroyed to get justice. Catherine nodded slowly. That can be arranged. But Mrs. Mitchell, there's one thing I don't understand. The contract, the protection, the elaborate planning. If you knew all this 20 years ago, why stay? Why have a child with him? Why give him 20 years of your life? Sarah looked around the room at the glittering crowd of New York's elite, at the empire David had built on crime and cruelty, at the FBI agents still processing arrests. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly. Because love makes you stupid, and hope makes you stubborn. I spent 20 years believing the man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere, that Success and money had corrupted something originally good. I was wrong. He was always this person. I just refused to see it. She paused, then continued. But I also stayed because my father taught me something before he died. He said evil flourishes when good people do nothing. So I did something. I waited, I watched, I documented. And when David finally showed his true nature completely, I made sure the whole world could see it too. The room burst into spontaneous applause, but Sarah was already walking toward the exit. She had a son to reunite with, a life to rebuild, and for the first time in years, the freedom to do it on her own terms. The reunion with Michael happened in a small FBI conference room. Nothing like the dramatic confrontation Sarah had imagined. Her son sat across from her, looking older than his 19 years, wearing the same Columbia sweatshirt he'd had on when he'd turned away from her. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Sarah reached across the table, took his hands. "You have nothing to apologize for. Your father was a master manipulator. He fooled hundreds of people. But I should have trusted you. You're my mother. I knew you, the real you, and I still believed his lies." Agent Thornton entered with a laptop sitting beside them. "Michael was instrumental in this investigation, Mrs. Mitchell. When we approached him with evidence of his father's crimes, he immediately agreed to help." Michael squeezed Sarah's hands. "They showed me the footage, Mom. Dad putting something in your drinks, the forged signatures, the fake medical reports. I wanted to kill him." "Language," Sarah said automatically, then laughed at the normalcy of it. Jessica pulled up files on the laptop. "Mrs. Mitchell, we need to discuss next steps. David's assets are frozen, but the company is still operational. As the majority shareholder under the original contract, you have decisions to make." Sarah had been thinking about this moment for 3 days, planning while drugged, while hospitalized, while watching her life burn. "I want to talk about the other women first, the 17 victims." Jessica pulled up their files. Patricia Richardson, institutionalized, lost $30 million. Jennifer Walsh, attempted suicide, lost $18 million. Amanda Robert, living in a shelter with her 3 kids, lost $42 million. The list went on. Each woman's photo showed the same hollow eyes Sarah had seen in her own mirror. "Can we recover their money?" "Some of it. The FBI has traced about $300 million in hidden assets across the entire network. It'll take years of legal battles, but recovery is possible." "I want to create a fund," Sarah said. "Every penny we recover goes to these women first. I'll be fine with what's left." Michael looked at her with something like awe. "Mom, that could be hundreds of millions you're giving up." "It's not giving up. It's giving back. Your grandfather would understand." Catherine Shaw entered then, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Mrs. Mitchell, I thought you should know. David just tried to make a deal. He's offering to reveal the locations of another $200 million in hidden assets in exchange for minimum security prison." "What did you tell him?" "That it wasn't my call. The assets are technically yours now. The deal would require your agreement." Sarah stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. 20 years of marriage reduced to a negotiation about prison conditions. What else does he want? Visitation rights with Michael, the ability to communicate with you, and protection from the other inmates who've already heard about his crimes against women. "No visitation," Michael said immediately. "I never want to see him again." Sarah turned back. "Give him the minimum security. Let him reveal the assets, but no contact with either of us, ever. And Catherine? Make sure every penny he reveals goes to his victims first." Catherine nodded, making notes. "There's one more thing. The house in Westchester. It's yours, free and clear. But what?" Jessica pulled up photos on her laptop. The house was destroyed. Not just redecorated in Jessica's garish style, but actually demolished in places. Walls knocked down, art destroyed, furniture burned in the backyard. When David realized he was going to prison, he ordered his security team to destroy everything. We stopped them partway through, but the damage is extensive. Sarah looked at the ruins of her home and felt nothing. That life was over anyway. "Sell it. Whatever it brings, add it to the victims' fund." "Mom," Michael protested, "where will you live?" Sarah smiled. Your grandfather left a small apartment in the city. Nothing fancy, just a two-bedroom in Murray Hill. I think it's time I used it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of legal meetings, document signatures, and media requests. Every major network wanted Sarah's story. Book publishers called hourly. Netflix was already developing a limited series. Sarah declined them all. On the fourth day, she stood in a federal courtroom as David was formally charged with 47 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and espionage. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, his perfectly styled hair now gray at the roots. When his eyes met hers across the courtroom, she expected to feel something: anger, sadness, even pity. Instead, there was just emptiness, like looking at a stranger. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Foster, was one of the few in the district not implicated in David's network. Mr. Mitchell, you stand accused of crimes that spanned 2 decades and destroyed multiple lives. How do you plead? David's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but David stood, his ego still unable to accept defeat. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. Mr. Mitchell, I strongly advise against— I built an empire, David interrupted, his voice carrying across the courtroom. I created booms, innovation, wealth. Yes, I cut corners. Yes, I bent rules. But that's what greatness requires. My wife, she was nothing before me. A trust fund baby playing at being an analyst. I made her. I gave her a life worth living. And this is how she repays me? The judge's expression didn't change. Are you finished, Mr. Mitchell? No, I want it on record that Sarah Mitchell was complicit in everything. She knew about the offshore accounts. She signed the papers. She benefited from every crime. If I'm guilty, so is she. Sarah's lawyer started to object, but Sarah stood. Your Honor, may I respond? Judge Foster nodded. David's right. I did benefit. I lived in a beautiful home bought with tainted money. I wore jewelry purchased with stolen funds. I turned a blind eye to his crimes for years, telling myself it wasn't my responsibility. Sarah's voice was clear, carrying to every corner of the courtroom. But I woke up. I chose justice over comfort, truth over silence. That's the difference between us, David. You're still trying to win a game that's already over. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Foster said, how do you plead? David's shoulders slumped. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom like a death knell. 47 counts, guilty on all. The sentencing would come later, but everyone knew David Mitchell would die in prison. As they led him away, he called out one last time. Sarah, the contract. There's something you don't know about the contract. She didn't turn around. Whatever secret he thought he had, it didn't matter anymore. The war was over. The revelation came 3 weeks later, delivered by a nervous young associate from David's former law firm. Sarah was in her father's old apartment, finally feeling something like peace, when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm James Crawford from Pike Brennan and Associates. I have something that Mr. Pike asked me to deliver if David Mitchell was ever convicted. He handed her an envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a single page, an addendum to the original contract, signed and notarized. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read, Addendum 14C, upon the death or incapacitation of either party, all assets transfer automatically to Jessica Blake, permanent beneficiary as established by both parties. The signature was hers, perfectly forged, but 20 years old, meaning it predated any way to prove it wasn't real. And Jessica Blake, Agent Jessica Thornton's cover identity. Sarah's hands shook as she called Catherine Shaw. We have a problem. They met in Central Park, away from any surveillance. Catherine examined the document under a magnifying glass. This is sophisticated. If this is real, it's not real. I never signed this. But can you prove that? It's aged correctly. The notary seal is authentic. The notary himself died 15 years ago. Sarah's mind raced. David knew Jessica would be FBI. He knew her cover name years before she was assigned to him. How? Catherine's face went pale. Unless he didn't know, unless this is the biggest coincidence in history, or someone's been playing a longer game than we imagined. They found Jessica Thornton at FBI headquarters in the middle of cataloging evidence. She looked up, surprised. Mrs. Mitchell, is everything okay? Sarah placed the addendum on the desk. Jessica read it, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. This is impossible. I've only been Jessica Blake for 3 years. Or have you? Catherine asked. What's your real name, Agent Thornton? Jessica Ann Thornton, born in Baltimore, 1996. And your mother's maiden name? Jessica frowned. Blake. Why? The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind like a horrible puzzle. David didn't hire you. Someone hired you to get close to David. Someone who's been planning this for 20 years. Catherine was already on her phone barking orders. Within an hour, they had Jessica's full history pulled up on screen. Adopted at age 2, birth parents unknown, adoption facilitated by a law firm in Delaware, the same firm that had registered David's parent company. Who paid for your education, Jessica? Sarah asked quietly. Scholarships. I was always told I had an anonymous benefactor who believed in my potential. Sarah pulled up a photo on her phone, her father taken a year before his death. Have you ever seen this man? Jessica shook her head, but something flickered in her eyes. Wait, I have a music box. Had it since I was a child. There's a photo inside, old and faded. The adoption agency said it was the only thing I had from my birth family. 2 hours later, Jessica returned with the music box. Inside, barely visible, was the same photo. Sarah's father, but younger, holding a baby. That's not possible, Sarah whispered. My father only had 2 daughters. Catherine pulled up medical records, sealed adoption files that required a federal warrant to access. The truth was there in black and white. Sarah's father had had an affair 29 years ago. The woman had died in childbirth. The baby had been put up for adoption with a trust fund attached, managed by the same lawyer who'd written Sarah's contract. You're my sister, Sarah said, the words feeling impossible. Half-sister. Jessica stumbled backward. No, that's insane. Your entire education was paid for by my father's estate. Your FBI recruitment? I'm betting someone pulled strings. You were placed in financial crime specifically. You were always meant to be here in this moment, holding this addendum. But why? Jessica's voice cracked. Sarah understood with terrible clarity. Because my father knew David would betray me eventually. He knew I'd honor the contract, but he also knew David was smart enough to plan for that. So he created you, a fail-safe, someone with legal claim to everything if David tried to use a forged addendum. Catherine pulled up more files. The notary who supposedly signed this, he was investigated for fraud 20 years ago by your father, Mrs. Mitchell. The investigation was dropped, but the evidence was sealed. Evidence that would prove any document he notarized was potentially fraudulent. My father destroyed the notary's credibility before he died, Sarah said, making any addendum worthless. But Jessica was staring at the contract. There's more. Look at the beneficiary language. Jessica Blake, permanent beneficiary as established by both parties. Both parties never established anything. This language voids the entire addendum. The relief was overwhelming, but Sarah couldn't shake the larger implication. Her father had orchestrated all of this. Jessica's entire life, her career, her assignment to this case. He used you, Sarah said to Jessica. Used both of us. To destroy David, Jessica said quietly. Your father spent his last years setting up dominoes that would fall decades later. Sarah's phone rang. Michael. Mom, you need to see the news. She turned on the TV in Catherine's office. Breaking news, David Mitchell had been attacked in federal prison. He was in critical condition, not expected to survive. The attacker was a former employee of one of the women he'd destroyed. No, Sarah breathed. This wasn't supposed to happen. David was supposed to face justice, not vengeance. They rushed to the hospital. David was in surgery, machines keeping him alive. His lawyer was there looking defeated. He wants to see you, Mrs. Mitchell, if he survives. He says there's something else, something about your father. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor emerged. He's stable, paralyzed from the chest down, but alive. He's asking for his wife. Sarah entered the ICU. David looked small, broken, tubes and wires everywhere. His eyes tracked to her, still sharp despite everything. Sarah, he whispered, your father. He knew about the espionage from the beginning. He facilitated it. You're lying. The Chinese contacts, they were his. He was using me to funnel information while keeping his hands clean. When he got sick, he cut ties, made me the sole fall guy. The contract wasn't protection, Sarah. It was blackmail. If I ever betrayed you, I'd take the fall for his crimes too. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. No. Check Swiss account 447226. Your maiden name is the password. He kept records of everything. Insurance, he called it. Sarah left without another word. That night, she and Jessica accessed the account. Inside were documents, correspondence, proof that her father had been the real architect of the espionage 20 years ago. David had been his puppet, then his fall guy. He was protecting the family fortune, Jessica said, reading through the files. He was billions in debt from bad investments. The espionage money saved everything, saved your inheritance. Sarah stared at the evidence of her father's crimes, the man she'd idolized. He'd built her entire life on lies, then built an elaborate trap to protect those lies. What do we do? Jessica asked. Sarah thought of the 17 women David had destroyed, of Michael, who deserved a future free from this poison, of Jessica, who'd lived her entire life as someone's chess piece. We burn it, Sarah said. All of it. The evidence dies with us. But the truth is that evil men destroyed innocent women. David's going to prison for crimes he did commit. My father's dead. Justice has been served, even if the full story is more complex. They destroyed the files that night, using the FBI incinerator with Catherine's quiet approval. Some truths were too destructive to survive. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the renovated offices of Phoenix Holdings, the company that had risen from Mitchell Technologies' ashes. The name was Michael's suggestion, a new beginning from the ruins of the old. The 17 women David had destroyed were all shareholders now, their stolen wealth slowly being rebuilt through careful management and successful ventures. Jessica, now openly acknowledged as Sarah's half-sister, served as CFO. Her FBI career was over, but her financial expertise was invaluable. The two women had built something unexpected from the wreckage of their father's machinations, a genuine partnership. Patricia Richardson's daughter got into Harvard, Jessica announced, entering Sarah's office with a smile. Full scholarship from our education fund. Good. That makes 12 kids we've put through college so far. Michael knocked and entered, looking every inch the young executive in his new suit. He'd finished his degree at Columbia, paid for by the legitimate profits of Phoenix Holdings. Mom, Aunt Jess, there's someone here to see you. David Mitchell rolled in, his wheelchair pushed by a nurse. The paralysis had been permanent, his fortune gone, his reputation destroyed. He'd been released from federal custody on compassionate grounds, with 20 years of supervised probation that was essentially a life sentence. What do you want, David? Sarah's voice was neutral, neither hostile nor welcoming. I'm dying, he said simply. Kidney failure. Maybe 6 months. I wanted to ask for something I don't deserve. Which is? Forgiveness. The room was silent, Michael's hands clenched into fists. Jessica's expression was stone. Not for me, David continued. I don't expect that. But Michael deserves to move forward without carrying hatred for his father. Hate is poison, Sarah. Your father taught me that. Don't you dare speak about my father, Sarah said quietly. Our father, Jessica corrected, and David's eyes widened. Of course, he said, understanding flooding his features. The long game. He always played the long game. David looked at his son. Michael, I was a terrible father and a worse human being. I chose greed over family, power over love. But you chose right. You chose your mother. Keep choosing right. Michael stepped forward. You destroyed everything. No, David said, I destroyed myself. Everything else? Your mother rebuilt it better, stronger. Look around, son. This company helps people now instead of crushing them. That's her victory. He nodded to his nurse, who began wheeling him out. At the door, he paused. Sarah, the Swiss account. There's another one, 4472227. Same password. Your father left something else. Something that's actually worth keeping. After he left, Sarah sat in silence for a long moment. Then she accessed the account David had mentioned. Inside was a single video file, dated a month before her father's death. Her father appeared on screen, gaunt from cancer, but eyes still sharp. Sarah, if you're watching this, it means David betrayed you and you've discovered the truth about my crimes. I won't apologize for protecting our family's wealth, but I will apologize for the method. He coughed, struggled, continued. David was ambitious but weak, perfect for my purposes. I used him, yes, but I also chose him for you because I saw something else. The capacity for genuine love, buried under the greed. I hoped that with the right partner, he might become better. I was wrong. The contract, the contingencies, Jessica, they were all insurance policies. Not against David, but for you, to ensure that no matter how dark things got, you'd have the tools to rebuild. The strength to survive, the allies to help you rise. Your real inheritance isn't money, Sarah, it's resilience. The ability to take something broken and make it better. David could never understand that, but you do. I'm proud of you, even though I'll never see what you become. Take care of Jessica. She's as much a victim of my schemes as anyone. And remember, sometimes the greatest justice is not in revealing every truth, but in building something good from the ruins of something corrupt. The video ended. Sarah closed the laptop and looked at her family, her real family. Michael, young and idealistic. Jessica, brilliant and finally free. Even the ghosts were present. The 17 women rebuilding their lives. Her father's complex legacy, David's imminent mortality. We have a board meeting in an hour, Jessica said, bringing them back to the present. The expansion into Chicago needs approval. And I have that presentation for the Survivors Fund, Michael added. Sarah smiled, standing. Then let's get to work. As they left the office together, Sarah thought about the contract that had started everything. A piece of paper her father had designed as a weapon. But weapons could be reforged into tools. Destruction could become construction. And sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was success. It was helping others. It was choosing to build rather than burn. David Mitchell had signed everything over to his mistress, shocked when his wife presented the secret contract. But the real shock was what came after. A woman who chose justice over vengeance, rebuilding over revenge, and turned a tragedy into a triumph that would outlive them all. The secret contract had done its job, but Sarah Mitchell's true victory was in transcending it entirely. Outside, Manhattan stretched endless and possible. Phoenix Holdings had 43 employees now, all of them women who had been wronged by the system, given second chances and real power. The company was valued at $300 million and growing. Sarah's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it, then saw the preview. Mrs. Mitchell, my husband is hiding assets in our divorce. I heard about what you did. Can you help? She showed it to Jessica, who smiled. The Rebecca Harrington case? I've been researching her husband. Classic hidden offshore structure. Then let's help her, Sarah said. As they walked back into the building, Sarah thought about her father's final words. Building something good from the ruins of something corrupt. He'd been a criminal, but he'd been right about one thing. Sometimes the greatest justice was in the rebuilding, and Sarah Mitchell was very good at rebuilding. The contract that had destroyed David Mitchell wasn't just a legal document. It was a catalyst for transformation. What started as a trap had become a foundation. What began as revenge had evolved into justice. And what could have ended in mutual destruction had instead created something unprecedented. A company built by survivors, for survivors. David had signed everything over to his mistress. But in the end, Sarah Mitchell had signed something far more powerful. She'd signed a new future into existence. One signature, one survivor, one victory at a time. 2 years later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier who insisted on placing it directly in Sarah's hands. The return address was the federal medical facility where David had spent his final days. He died 6 months ago, alone, except for the prison chaplain. Sarah hadn't attended the funeral. Neither had Michael. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper in David's handwriting. Sarah, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Good riddance, I'm sure you're thinking. You'd be right. I've had 2 years to think about everything. 2 years to understand what your father knew from the beginning. I was always going to destroy myself. He just made sure I wouldn't destroy you in the process. There's one last secret. Check the foundation of the Westchester house. Southeast corner, 30 feet down. Your father left something there the day we signed the original contract. He said it was for the winner. I always thought that would be me. I was wrong about everything, Sarah. Everything except one thing. I did love you once before I loved money more. David, Sarah drove to the ruins of their old house, now an empty lot waiting for development. She hired an excavation crew, watched as they dug. 30 feet down, they hit a metal box, sealed and waterproof. Inside was another contract, this one between her father and a young David Mitchell. But it wasn't about business. It was a personal pledge David had signed, promising to love, honor, and protect Sarah for the rest of his life. Below it, her father had written, David, if Sarah ever finds this, it means you broke this promise. I'm betting my daughter's happiness that you won't. Prove me right. Below that, in David's young handwriting, from all those years ago, I swear I will. Sarah stood in the ruins of her old life, holding proof that David had once been the man she'd thought she'd married. He'd become a monster, yes, but he'd started as someone capable of making that promise and meaning it. She burned the contract that evening, watching the smoke rise into the dark sky. Some promises were meant to be broken. Some people were meant to fail. But from those failures, if you were strong enough, smart enough, patient enough, you could build something better. Phoenix Holdings went public the following month, valued at $2 billion. Sarah rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, flanked by Jessica and Michael. In the crowd stood 17 women whose lives had been rebuilt, their children educated, their futures secured. The news coverage mentioned David Mitchell only in passing, a footnote to a larger story of triumph. The secret contract that had shocked him was now just history. But the real contract, the one that mattered, wasn't written on paper. It was the unspoken agreement between the survivors to lift each other up, to never forget but always forward, to build something beautiful from the ashes of something broken. That contract would never be broken, and it didn't need a signature. It just needed belief.